Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
For years, Mr. Cohen has acted like he is above the law. He has considered himself and openly referred to himself as Mr. Trump's fixer. He's played by a different set of rules, or should we say no rules at all. He has never thought that the little man, or especially women, and even more women like me, mattered. That ends now. My attorney and I are committed to making sure that everyone finds out the truth and the facts of what happened, and I give my word that we will not rest until that happens. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Honest to God, man, they are the reason Michael Cohen was in court yesterday. They didn't bring Michael Cohen into court yesterday. Michael Cohen brought Michael Cohen into court yesterday. This is a really elaborate trap that was set for Michael Cohen, and Michael Cohen is such an idiot that he took the bait, okay? Nobody forced Michael Cohen to go to court yesterday. There was no reason for Michael Cohen to go to court yesterday, except Michael Cohen wanted to go to court yesterday because Michael Cohen wanted to ask the judge if he could sift through the documents that were taken by the FBI in New York, and if he could, determine which of those materials were protected under attorney-client privilege. And of course, the court asked one simple question: how many clients do you have, and who are they? Because the taint team will take your list and they will protect any client and, that you have. Any of their communications with you will be protected. And they couldn't answer the damn question because they don't have any clients. Michael Cohen has one client, and that client is Donald Trump. He may have inserted himself into another settlement case with another Playboy model on behalf of the vice chair of the Republican National Committee, which fell to him through the lawyer for these girls. I mean, that's another story. But the only reason why Michael Cohen was in court yesterday is because Michael Cohen wanted to be in court yesterday, and the judge simply asked, who are your clients? And when he said who his clients were, he included Sean Hannity. So Stormy Daniels equaled Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen went to court saying he's got to protect his clients. Trump's consigliere went to court. And in exposing, his love for the attorney-client privilege, he exposed himself as being somebody who doesn't have clients except for Donald Trump and Donald Trump's fanboy, Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity has been on his television show defending Michael Cohen, trashing law enforcement, and promoting generally Russian propaganda. What propaganda, Randy? You remember the Seth Rich propaganda? You remember that? Yeah, well, that story is a piece of Russian propaganda. Do you recall that Sean Hannity interviewed Julian Assange many times? Do you recall that Sean Hannity asked Julian Assange to sit in for him, to be his guest host? Do you recall that Sean Hannity went to London and got into the Ecuadorian embassy and got a couple of sit-downs, like 5 times, with Julian Assange? Do you remember that Sean Hannity was direct messaging with Julian Assange? This thing is about to blow wide open. And Michael Avenatti set the trap, and this is why Michael Avenatti thinks that Michael Cohen will roll over. Michael Cohen is about to be exposed as being the person who paid off Russian hackers, being the person who was feeding all kinds of stories to Sean Hannity and being, also in touch with WikiLeaks, in touch with Julian Assange, in touch with Roger Stone. This whole story is about to get super simple, and it's going to be just a handful of these crazy people who actually conspired with Russia and Russian hacking and Russian hackers, paid them when Donald Trump stood there and said, Russia, if you're listening, I hope you can find. He wasn't kidding. He was saying, I'm going to pay you for this. I want it done. I want it done. And all these people are part of Donald Trump's Cosa Nostra. The protection that Sean Hannity gives on that channel to this mob family. This is why Comey said that he got this feeling that they were behaving like a mob family. This is why when Comey sat down, and he will continue to sit down and continue to give interviews, he keeps saying that from the minute that he met Donald Trump, he had this feeling that it was Cosa Nostra. It felt very familiar to him. He was having flashbacks of when they prosecuted John Gotti. He understood that it was just a family, a family of mobsters who were protecting the Don, and that Trump was the Don. And he understood it. He understood it. And so who are the members of the family? It's Michael Cohen. It's Roger Stone. It's Sean Hannity. It's Julian Assange. It's, a handful of people, that Hope Hicks was willing to do criminal things. She was willing to put out. It's his son, Junior, who's meeting with her. Even Jeff Sessions was willing to go along for a while. I mean, this thing is just bizarro world, but yet it's super, super simple. Michael Avenatti and Stormy Daniels set a trap. And Michael Cohen on Friday petitioned the court to hear him and walked into that trap. And that's why yesterday the third client was Sean Hannity, because Sean Hannity was the propaganda machine. He was the protection in the media. Remember in The Godfather, it's funny, reminded me of this scene. Remember in The Godfather, after Michael goes to the hospital because he knows, there's been an attempted murder on his father, and he gets Enzo the baker to stand guard over his father, and he goes outside, and Sollozzo, the cop, beats up Michael, and tells him, you better shut up about all this and blah, blah, blah. And Michael calls Tom Hayden, right? And he says, just got beat up by a cop. We got somebody at the papers, don't we? Don't we have a friendly reporter? I mean, I think a reporter would like a story like this, that a cop beat me up. I think a reporter would like a story like that. And Tom assures him, yeah, we got somebody in the press. We got somebody in the press who could fix it for you. That's what Sean Hannity is. He's the fixer in the media. Michael Cohen is the fixer on the women and, pursuing Trump Tower, Russia deals, things like that, And obviously, Julian Assange is the person who was contacted in order to be plausible deniability between Russian hackers. 13 indictments of Russian hackers and Russian, individuals. I think Mueller knows who paid them. But let's just start with why Stormy was there yesterday. She wanted to witness the actual fall of all these people who have tormented her. Oh, by the way, today she dealt with a sketch artist, and she had this world-renowned sketch artist draw a picture of the guy she said Michael Cohen dispatched to that parking lot in her. Remember, she was going for a workout class. In the parking lot, she was she was approached by a thug who said, looked in the car and saw her little infant daughter in 2011 after she, had given an interview to In Touch magazine. And Trump, calls Michael Cohen, and Michael Cohen calls somebody in L.A. to go scare her. And this guy walks up to the car and says to her, oh, it's a beautiful baby you got there. It would be a shame if something happened to our mother. Leave Donald Trump alone. And so Stormy Daniels sat down with a sketch artist and came up with a sketch of the guy who she remembers as being the guy. Now look at that. I mean, if you're watching on video, it's as if Tom Brady and John Bon Jovi had a love child. Yeah. I mean, that is one hot man. Look at that. So I'm thinking like John Bon Jovi needs to say where he and Tom Brady needs to say where he was that, and their love child that of course is. But she actually created, she went to this artist, and, this is a world-renowned sketch artist who has, devoted her life to sitting with victims to draw the person that they don't have a photo of or that they, remember but can't prove, So now there's a $100,000 reward issued by Stormy Daniels and Michael Avenatti for the identification of that individual. But she's not giving up. She's not giving up, and neither is Avenatti.
Last night, at the end of all this, as we start to kind of look forward, right? You said last night you made two predictions. One prediction was Michael Cohen's going to get indicted in the next 90 days, and the other is that Michael Cohen's going to roll in the president. Please explain the reasoning behind both of those predictions.
Well, I think this investigation has taken on an enormous amount of momentum. I think the amount of information that was obtained is significant. From what I've heard, from what I've seen, there's no question that Michael Cohen's going to be charged. It's only a question of when, and I think it's going to happen within the next 90 days. Based on my experience in white-collar criminal investigations and prosecutions, the likelihood of him not rolling over is very, very slim. I can't imagine he's going to go to trial or potentially face 10, 15, 20, 25 years in a federal penitentiary for anybody, let alone a guy, Donald Trump, who left him behind when he went to Washington, D.C. I mean, don't forget that Michael Cohen was supposedly his right-hand fixer, et cetera, and when Donald Trump was finally elected, he blew Michael Cohen off.
Michael Cohen wanted to work on the campaign. He was stiff-armed. He wanted to go to Washington, D.C. He was stiff-armed because Trump didn't think he was good enough to be in Washington.
And so how many times are you stiff-armed before you say, as they say in Italian, basta, enough? You think Michael Cohen's wife is going to advise him to take a 20-year bullet for the president?
Now, if the president is floating pardons to Michael Cohen, which I know some of the more deep thinkers in this audience are saying, yeah, but, that would be obstruction of justice. And I'm sure a case will be brought in New York State, which will be beyond the pardon power of the president. So that said, get that out of your head for a brief moment. Let me show you why it was so important. Well, here's the context in which Hannity's name was brought up, and then we'll start connecting dots for you, okay?
You got to understand the context in which this came up. Last Friday, the judge asked for the names of the clients for which they were seeking to protect documents based on the attorney-client privilege. Documents, okay? That's a critical issue, because what this means to me is that the reason why Sean Hannity's name was disclosed yesterday is because there are documents relating to whatever legal advice Michael Cohen gave Sean Hannity, and they're seeking to protect those documents under the attorney-client privilege.
There are documents between Michael Cohen and Sean Hannity. Documents. What documents could there be? Well, there could be emails saying, hey, let's pin this all on Seth Rich, because if this kid, now, for those of you who need a little memory recollection, Seth Rich was a kid who worked at the Democratic National Committee in Washington, D.C., a building I've been to. We broadcast out of there. It's just a little nondescript building. Anyway, Seth Rich was a kid who worked there. And one night, Seth Rich was, in his apartment, decided he wanted to go to the convenience store to get something. And he was the victim of a botched robbery. And he was shot and he was killed. Well, I mean, literally within an hour, it started to appear on Fox News as a bombshell that Seth Rich was the disgruntled DNC employee. The reason why Seth Rich, according to Fox, was disgruntled was because he was a Bernie guy. And when Hillary got the nomination, he was so peeved. He was so angry. He was so upset that he is the source of the DNC email leaks. And the reason why that was important to Fox is because if they could say Seth Rich was the source of the DNC leaked emails, then there was no Russian hacking. Okay? Of course, the intelligence community would disagree with all of that, but it did not stop Fox News from breathlessly reporting this.
Another Fox News alert, a huge bombshell in the murder of this DNC staffer.
An investigator now says Seth Rich was in contact with WikiLeaks before he was murdered. So if that is true, and we don't know yet, looks like Russia didn't give it to WikiLeaks.
Right.
Well, it was Seth Rich, perhaps.
You see what I mean there, okay? And this was a lie. And it's such a lie that guess who else has a civil case? Seth Rich's parents have a civil case in court active now, and so does Seth Rich's brother Aaron have a case active in court now because they trashed this kid and they said Hillary Clinton had their son killed. Here's Newt Gingrich on Fox News on Seth Rich.
At the same time, we have this very strange story now of this young man who worked for the Democratic National Committee who apparently was assassinated at 4 in the morning, having given WikiLeaks something like 53,000 emails and 17,000 attachments. Nobody's investigating that. And what does that tell you about what was going on? Because it turns out it wasn't the Russians. It was this young guy who I suspect was disgusted by the corruption of the Democratic National Committee. He's been killed, and apparently nothing serious has been done to investigate his murder. So I'd like to see how Mueller is going to define what his assignment is. And if it's only narrowly Trump, the country will not learn what it needs to learn about foreign involvement in American politics.
All right, so they brought in Newt Gingrich. Here's Hannity on his radio show.
This issue is so big now that the entire Russia collusion narrative is hanging by a thread. If, in fact, take Seth out of it, there was a whistleblower within the DNC, a truth teller, that actually was the source for WikiLeaks and not Russia working with the Trump campaign. These are questions that I have a moral obligation to ask.
All right, then. And here is Sean Hannity interviewing a person named Rod Wheeler, who is also suing, saying that his reporting was distorted to, by Fox News, by Sean Hannity, in order to help make the case about Seth Rich.
Every time I talk with the police department, though, Sean, every time I talk to the police department about the WikiLeaks or the emails, it's automatically shut down. That discussion is automatically shut down.
Well, so we don't know for sure if the FBI or if the D.C. police have any access to these forensics, these emails?
Right. We don't know. We actually have a statement from the FBI telling us to contact the D.C. police. The D.C. police says contact the FBI. Now, which is it? If this is just a murder investigation, first of all, why would the FBI be involved? The only reason the FBI would be involved, just so that the viewers understand, is if this has some degree of national exposure, meaning because maybe it is related to the DNC, and we don't know that.
So Rod Wheeler was roped into this. Now he's suing Fox News, too. All right, let me play you an interview that Sean Hannity did with Julian Assange. And you'll see the origin of the Seth Rich story here. Julian Assange, Sean Hannity is able to get in to see Julian Assange. And they're looking for some cover for Julian Assange. And they're looking for some cover for Russia. Because obviously, we now know that a Russian GRU agent, the Russian intelligence outfit, GRU, had an agent named Guccifer 2.0 who was negotiating with Julian Assange on Twitter and to give the hacked documents to Julian Assange. Julian Assange wants to deny that he got hacked material from Russia. And so he starts floating, well, I think it was this DNC staffer. I think it was a disgruntled DNC staffer who was killed by Hillary Clinton. Now, he's not going to say it right, like that. But you can see where the conspiracy begins. And Sean Hannity is not only open to it, but Sean Hannity will tweet about it constantly and put it on his show constantly that Seth Rich was the source for the DNC emails.
Can you say to the American people unequivocally that you did not get this information about the DNC, John Podesta's emails? Can you tell the American people 1,000% you did not get it from Russia or anybody associated with Russia?
We can say, we have said repeatedly over the last 2 months that our source is not the Russian government and it is not a state party.
There was one report in the Daily Mail that suggested somebody that you are friendly with actually was handed the documents at American University in a wooded area by a disgruntled Democrat who felt betrayed because the revelation showed that Bernie Sanders had been betrayed, and they didn't like the corruption of the Clinton Foundation. Can you confirm or deny that? Is that story true?
Well, that statement came from Craig Murray. He friend of yours? Friend of mine. He's been here several times. But WikiLeaks is a source protection organization. We are famous for never having exposed one of our sources over 10 years. That's why sources trust us and they come to us.
Okay, so he floats this story that a friend of his, friend of Julian Assange's, comes to London and goes into the Ecuadorian embassy and says, hey, I heard or I know or whatever that there was a disgruntled DNC staffer, Seth Rich, and he went to the wooded area behind American University. That's exactly where I lived. That's exactly where I live. Ward Circle. That's right in front of American University. And the park there is called Rock Creek Park. And it's beautiful. So he's suggesting that Seth Rich went into Rock Creek Park and handed over all the DNC emails for delivery to Julian Assange. This is how the conspiracy about Seth Rich began. And it began with Sean Hannity and Julian Assange. Then Julian Assange is going to float another cover story, this one at the behest of covering for Roger Stone's, sorry little drapery ass. And he's going to suggest perhaps it was my old friend Randi Credico. But Julian, right? This is insanity, okay? This is just, all they're doing is covering their ass.
There was some report that you might have talked to somebody who was not associated with the campaign, Roger Stone.
No, that's false. I think where this Roger Stone claim is coming from is there's a radio guy on WBAI.
That's Randy.
Which is a mutual friend who wanted to come and see me to see if I would set up a radio show on WBAI, but he didn't. He did come to London, but he didn't meet with me.
Poor Randy. Poor Randy. Randy was in London to see Barry Crimmins, who has just recently passed away. And he decided that he would go to the Ecuadorian embassy and see if he could get in to see Julian Assange, to get Julian Assange to come on his radio show on WBAI. He lost that job, by the way. But that's, so they're just floating ideas about people that they can pin this all on. But here you see that Hannity was always in touch with Assange. Assange got the DNC hacks from the GRU, the Russian intelligence agent, Guccifer 2.0. Roger Stone was also in touch with Guccifer 2.0. So Assange begins to float this Seth Rich conspiracy story. Maybe Randi Credico could be used as cover for everyone. Cover for the Russian agent Guccifer, cover for Roger Stone, cover for WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. And Hannity will be the vessel through which all this fake news will be disseminated. And not to disappoint, that's exactly what Hannity does. All of this culminates on the computers, on the emails, this is why Sean Hannity's saying, well, I didn't hire Michael Cohen in the traditional sense, but I did seek some legal advice from him. Yeah, because after the Seth Rich conspiracy blew up in Fox News' face, Sean Hannity was rejected by Fox News. They put out a statement saying they don't stand by any of his reporting on this. None of it's been proven to be true. And they are retracting the story that was reported by their reporters, Zimmerman and another reporter, and that Hannity's on his own on this. And instantly, a boycott of Hannity's advertisers begins because they are blaming a murder victim for what the Russian government did. And Hannity goes to Michael Cohen, or has already been to Michael Cohen, to coordinate all this. And he says, now what, Michael? Now I'm going to lose my job because of you. Now I'm going to lose my job because my advertisers are pulling out. Okay, and this is exactly what Gabriel Sherman heard that Michael Cohen was used for by Sean Hannity, that Sean Hannity went to Michael Cohen to help him with the advertiser boycott.
Remarkable development, although not entirely surprising when you actually connect the dots. You know, this is a very fast-moving story, so I'm going to be doing a lot more reporting. But what I have heard so far is that at some point last year, Sean Hannity hired Michael Cohen to help defend him against left-wing groups that were calling for boycotts sort of in the wake of Bill O'Reilly's ouster from Fox News under pressure from advertisers and left-wing groups. My sources said Hannity got very, quote, paranoid and hired Cohen and perhaps other lawyers and or private investigators to look into these groups that were calling for boycotts and trying to get Hannity off the air. Now, this could be very interesting because oftentimes private investigators are hired by law firms because it allows attorney-client privilege to be maintained. So there is a scenario in which if they've seized Michael Cohen's documents, inadvertently we might be able to learn to what degree did Sean Hannity try to go after his enemies with shady tactics like private investigators.
So Gabriel Sherman, who writes for Vanity Fair, is a very fine reporter, is reporting that he's hearing that Sean Hannity contacted Michael Cohen to stave off an advertiser boycott that was being coordinated, by left-wing groups. I'm going to guess, Move On and Media Matters and others who, are responsible for spreading, information about advertisers you could boycott if you are angry about, Bill O'Reilly, or if you're angry about, Sean Hannity. Now, Gabriel Sherman is saying this has more to do with Bill O'Reilly's sexual harassment, and Sean got paranoid, so that's why he reached out to Michael Cohen. I'm going to layer on top of that reporting my opinion that once he was in touch with Michael Cohen on the issue of advertiser boycotts, after the Seth Rich story backfired on Sean Hannity in a very dramatic way, advertiser boycotts began again. And so Michael Cohen was called to give help on those advertiser boycotts, which were a direct result of the Seth Rich conspiracy propaganda that Sean Hannity developed with Michael Cohen, with Julian Assange, with Roger Stone. Here's Sean Hannity talking to Roger Stone and Julian Assange.
I might be the only person in America that has actually interviewed Julian Assange 5 times. And I did go to the Ecuadorian embassy. Mm-hmm. Some people like him, some people don't like him. That's irrelevant. We know he's the one that put the emails in play. He put them out. He revealed these emails to the world. The question that I think we've got to ask ourselves, if Robert Mueller, if his mandate, which is now expanded even into the UAE and well beyond what his original mandate is, but if his mandate is to discover Trump-Russia collusion, where these emails came from, did they come from Russia, don't you think the first guy you might want to ask or try and get information from would be the guy that the one person on earth that knows where that came from? Whether you like Julian or don't like Julian, that would be Julian Assange. I can't say with certainty anybody else on the face of this earth would know 100%, but he would.
Well, when I said on MSNBC tonight that I did not believe that Julian Assange was a Russian agent, and I did not believe that WikiLeaks is a Russian asset, I think he's an honest journalist. And no one has questioned the authenticity or the accuracy of any of the material that WikiLeaks has released.
11 years.
So their whole premise is
11 years.
Their whole false premise.
11 years, they've never gotten a thing wrong. That's a far better track record than the 3 major networks, MSNBC, CNN, The Washington Post, and The New York Times. Not once that I have ever seen did they get it wrong.
That's exactly right. And this entire narrative is based on a false premise from our politicized intelligence agencies that Julian Assange is a Russian agent.
You know, I don't believe anybody's ever said Julian Assange is a Russian agent. I think what is being said is that Julian Assange received the DNC hacked material from a Russian agent. They are very careful, these liars are. But obviously, Roger Stone is somebody that Sean Hannity protects. Obviously, Julian Assange is somebody Sean Hannity protects. Obviously, Michael Cohen is somebody that Sean Hannity protects. Okay, here's Sean Hannity protecting Michael Cohen. When the story first comes out that Michael Cohen has, been named in the dossier as being somebody who traveled to Prague. Of course, Michael Cohen immediately goes to Sean Hannity and sits down with Sean Hannity to deny that he's ever been to Prague. Okay, I think it's 17, right? Mm-hmm.
As far as BuzzFeed, which is a failing pile of garbage, writing it, I think they're going to suffer the consequences. They already are. And as far as CNN going out of their way to build it up, and by the way, we just found out I was coming down. Michael Cohen, Michael Cohen is a very talented lawyer. He's a good lawyer in my firm. It was just reported that it wasn't this Michael Cohen they were talking about. So all night long, it's Michael Cohen. I said, I want to see your passport. He brings his passport to my office. I say, hey, wait a minute. He didn't leave the country. He wasn't out of the country. They had Michael Cohen of the Trump Organization was in Prague. It turned out to be a different Michael Cohen. It's a disgrace what took place. It's a disgrace. And I think they ought to apologize to start with Michael Cohen.
And earlier today, I spoke with Michael Cohen all about this, and he said this. And joining us now, Executive Vice President and Special Counsel to Donald Trump, Michael Cohen is with us. How are you, sir?
Sean, how are you?
Now, wait a minute. Am I allowed to look at this? Is the I don't want to joke about it because it's serious in your life, but
it's very serious.
This is the passport.
Life. Yes, it is.
Okay. You're watching this unfold. I got a text from a friend of mine. Are you watching CNN? They're going insane. And then this whole thing unfolds. You're dragged into it all through the night last night. You're a private guy. We're friends, but I know you. This is not comfortable for you.
It's not comfortable, but I'm okay with it personally because it benefits Mr. Trump, and I'll do anything to protect Mr. Trump, the family, now Vice President-elect Pence, as well as the campaign. So I'm okay with it personally. The problem is that it affected my family, it affected my wife, my in-laws, my children, and that's not okay. And I believe CNN and BuzzFeed and others owe them a serious apology. You know, there's an old expression, where do you go to get your reputation back?
That's Ray, what was his name? Ray Donovan in the Reagan administration.
You know where you have to go?
So Michael Cohen goes to Sean Hannity the day that BuzzFeed publishes the entire dossier. Now, CNN was very careful not to mention any of the salacious parts of the dossier. They wouldn't print it, but BuzzFeed did. And obviously part of the dossier, not just the salacious part, but there was another story in the dossier that Michael Cohen had traveled to Prague in the Czech Republic. Checkmate, everybody. If Michael Cohen did go to the Czech Republic, that is checkmate. That in the dossier, Christopher Steele has a report about Michael Cohen traveling to Prague to pay the Russian hackers on behalf of his client, Donald Trump. And so Michael Cohen runs to Sean Hannity the day the dossier is published. They hold up his passport. They don't open his passport. The president says he calls Michael Cohen. He makes Michael Cohen come and show him his passport. But, nobody ever produces, any of the pages of the passport where a stamp that he left the country would be evident in the summer of 2016, okay? Nobody produces any of those pages. But now this ties right back to what we started explaining all this to you for. And that was Friday's McClatchy bombshell written by Peter Stone and his partner in reporting, Greg Gordon. And again, I'm going to read you the first paragraph of that report that came out on Friday that set Donald Trump into such a tiz that he was threatening to put people in jail, including James Comey, okay? He just couldn't help himself. He's threatening to jail American citizens. The president of the United States is. This is why. This is the first sentence in Peter Stone's report for McClatchy. The Justice Department Special Counsel, that's Bob Mueller, has evidence that Donald Trump's personal lawyer and confidant, Michael Cohen, secretly made a late summer trip to Prague during the 2016 presidential campaign, according to two sources familiar with the matter. It goes on. Confirmation of the trip would lend credence to a retired British spy's report that Cohen strategized there with powerful Kremlin figures about Russian meddling in the U.S. election. It would also be one of the most significant developments thus far in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation of whether the Trump campaign and the Kremlin worked together to help Trump win the White House, undercutting Trump's repeated pronouncements that there is no evidence of collusion, no evidence of collusion, there's no collusion here, you're the colluder. That story on Friday was so freaking pivotal and important because if I have no reason to doubt McClatchy would correct it if they got it wrong. You would see a correction. You would see, our earlier reporting was in error. Sean Hannity will never do that. But obviously, this is the interest that Mueller has had in Michael Cohen for a long time, separate and apart from the taxi medallions or the paying off of Stormy Daniels. But Stormy Daniels and Michael Avenatti, I think they've connected the dots. I think they know how deep Michael Cohen's connection to the Trump Tower Moscow project, to the Kremlin, to the trip to I think they know the can of worms that they opened. And that's why they were there yesterday, to watch Michael Cohen walk into the trap that they set in a civil case to catch Michael Cohen in the act of being corrupt. And it's going to lead to Michael Cohen's being indicted for criminal activity. We've already been told he's under criminal investigation, separate and apart from this evidence that Mueller may have. The Justice Department has evidence. This is how it's reported, that Donald Trump's personal lawyer and confidant Michael Cohen secretly made a late summer trip to Prague. The reason why it's alleged in the dossier that he went to Prague was to pay the Russian hackers. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.